country doesn't need a victory lap. It needs leadership. It's time for the president, congressional Democrats, to tell the American people what spending cuts they're really willing to make. I'm disappointed in where we are and disappointed in what's happened over the last couple of weeks.
If Republicans insist on spending cuts being part of a down payment, as discussed at the November 16th meeting, the onus is on them to come forward with some ideas.
Really, now is the time for the Republicans to move past this happy talk about revenues, ill-defined, of course, and put specifics on the table.
Their point that they make on the spending cuts is that, it's a $16 trillion deficit. So while some cuts have already been agreed to, there will need to be more.
No, there didn't need more. $1.5 trillion in cuts is a lot of money. I know we're in Washington, D.C., and we get used to big numbers, but $1.5 trillion in cuts, you go beyond that, you're talking about hurting the growth of our infrastructure, the education of our people, the very pillars of our economic strength.
It's not just a bad deal. This is really an insulting deal. What Geithner offered, what you showed on the screen, Robert E. Lee was offered easier terms at Appomattox, and he had lost the Civil War. The Democrats won by 3% of the vote, and they did not hold the House. Republicans won the House. So this is not exactly unconditional surrender, but that's what the administration is asking of the Republicans. This idea, there not only are no cuts in this, there's an increase in spending with a new stimulus. I mean, this is almost unheard of. I mean, what do they expect? They obviously expect the Republicans will cave on everything. I think the Republicans ought to simply walk away. The president is the president. He's the leader. They are demanding that Republicans explain all the cuts that they want to make. We had that movie a year and a half ago where Paul Ryan presented a budget, a serious, real budget, with real cuts. Obama was supposed to give a speech in which he would respond with a counteroffer. And what did he do? He gave a speech where he had Ryan sitting in the front row. He called the Ryan proposal un-American, insulted him, offered nothing, and ran on Medicare in the next 18 months. And they expect the Republicans are going to do this again. The Republicans are going to walk on this, and I think they have leverage. Yes, for congressional Democrats, it'll help them in the future if Republicans absorb the blame because we're going to have a recession. But Obama's not running again, unlike the congressional Democrats. He's going to have a recession, 9% unemployment, 2 million more unemployed, and a second term that's going to be a ruin. That is not a good proposition if you're Barack Obama.
There's a lot of things I've wanted in my life, but almost all of them had a price tag attached to them. And if we're going to talk about the debt limit in this, then there's going to be some price tag associated with it.
Asking for that a political price be paid in order for Congress to do its job to ensure that the United States of America pays its bills and does not default for the first time in its history is deeply irresponsible.
Over the cliff or not?
I think as of today, yes, everybody in one canoe all the way down.
Our main focus right now has been to work with other countries to try to provide whatever assistance we can to the opposition so that ultimately it can become not only an effective force, but ultimately can come together to provide the kind of political transformation that we think is ultimately going to be needed once Assad comes down.
I can categorically state that today our position is what it has been, which is we are not providing lethal assistance to the Syrian opposition.
The reason the administration is now going to change its policy, and has to, is because the ground is shifting in the war. Up until now, the rebels have been able to take land, but not really hold it. The only land held is between Aleppo and the Turkish frontier, and that's sort of their mini-state. But every time they've gone more towards Damascus and they've seized, for example, military bases, they're only able to hold it for a day or two because of air power. Well, what's just happened is that there's been a huge strategic shift. The rebels now have shoulder-held missiles that can bring down a helicopter and a plane. And when that happened in the Afghan war against the Soviets lost. That was the great strategic change. And once the Russians lost control of the air, the war was essentially over. That's happening right now. And because of that, I think the feeling is that what has been up to now a back and forth, a stalemate, and now looks as if the advantage is for the rebels. As long as this shipment of anti-aircraft missile continues, there's no reason why it should not, and the result will be the fall of the regime. The administration understands that time is running. If they're going to have any influence on the government that inherits Syria, which is now, the rebels are heavily infiltrated with jihadists, their time to intervene and to get friends is now.
And you have had 30,000 plus Syrians die on the ground, and their relatives, their families are not going to look kindly on a United States that stood by and watched this happen.
Steve is right. We are very, very late. The reason is that we had an election. Obama wanted to wash his hands, but now he has to do something, because otherwise we're going to end up with a nasty regime in Syria.
This has been a Sunfish production.